Hey, Ready Rich here, director and editor of the show. I guess we finally need to talk about how these shows are produced in the COVID-19 era. I'm pretty sure most of you have already dealt with Zoom calls and the other conferencing software online, and how there's always weird delays and people ended up talking over each other. And how we've been fixing that is by doing lots of local recording at every end. And that just fell apart completely in this episode. So there's a lot of times where people are making jokes and other people are laughing before the punchlines can be heard. And in this case, I lost everything from our guest. So I can only build the show from what I had from the original conference call. So you're going to notice me funnier than normal because I am stealing lines from Penn and our guest, Chris Matheson, because I have no other way to put them in this show. So if you hear me on this cheap iMac mic, as opposed to the nice studio one, you'll know it's not really me talking. Cool? Cool. Enjoy the show.
This is Penn Sunday School.
Okay, Godot. Show how good you
See
are.
if this crushes my internet again. Brothers, sisters, siblings, welcome to Penn Sunday School, starring Penn Gillette. My name is Michael Godot, Matt Donnelly, Ready Rich. Penn and I are broadcasting from our separate homes in Las Vegas. We'll continue our talk with the great co-writer of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and of course, Bill and Ted Face the Music. Chris Matheson is joining us. His agent must be so disappointed. Here he is, preaching love, Mr. Penn Gillette.
Yes, here I am preaching love. And I've got to ask you, with Brother Theodore putting you to bed, did Rod Serling give you your first cigarette?
I do remember meeting him. I don't know whether he gave me a cigarette. I wish. That'd be cool. Or a drink, a martini.
Yeah.
Your kid.
But didn't Rod Serling smoke like 5 packs a day?
He was pretty well known for being a very, very heavy smoker.
He and Walt Disney just...
Yeah.
Hanging out.
So who else did you get to meet as a child because your dad wrote for the Twilight Zone? Well, he also produced the Twilight Zone, right?
No, I don't think he produced it. He just wrote a number of the sort of important episodes. He wrote a lot of episodes.
You mentioned the Buster Keaton. Did he write the Buster Keaton one?
Did he end up writing the Buster Keaton one? I'd have to IMDb that.
There is a Buster Keaton Twilight Zone.
I don't know.
No.
I don't know. It must have been that. I don't know whether he did or not. If he didn't, then maybe there was the possibility that he was going to.
Now, did you watch the Twilight Zones as a child?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, especially my dad's episodes, obviously. But yeah. I mean, I did. It scared me because I was pretty young. So I was like 6 or 5 or 6, and some of them were pretty scary to me. I mean, certainly the thing on the wing was scary, but they weren't all scary. Like the thing like Real Steel with Lee Marvin as the boxer, the robot boxer, or Nick of Time with William Shatner and the little cafe and the fortune-telling machine. I mean, they're not scary. They're just kind of unsettling.
Well, I have good news. Your dad did write that.
He did write it.
He did.
And it's not very scary.
I don't even have a memory.
It's a guy from the 1890s who thinks that life is too hard and decides he wants to go into the future. He's a handyman. He works cleaning a guy's office, and the scientist he works for is building a time machine. He forwards himself up it starts off silent, and then it moves into a talkie, and he goes insane because of the noise, and then returns back to his own time.
Oh, now you ruined it for us.
No, sorry. Yeah, never saw that coming. Yeah, it's a good episode. It's nice.
So what inspired you to write the God books?
Well, as we were talking about, I think this sense of absolute truth, although it wasn't specifically, it was more New Agey. The model of it was more New Agey. It definitely was part of my life. There was a lot of that, and I think I just reached a certain age, and I just didn't care for it I didn't like the idea of absolute truth, and I didn't buy that somehow my dad had access to absolute truth. And I loved my dad, by the way. I was very, very close with my dad. It became, once I sort of veered off, it did get contentious between us. It did. I mean, we had a lot of arguments as I sort of,
What age you have the arguments?
I would say starting mid-20s. I would say up until I'm 25, we get along really, really well. And I don't really question him, and I don't really challenge him at all. And then it just started to look like it was, to me, like it was about him. It was about his fears. It was about his needs. It was about his ego. It was about him. And I didn't like, so I had my starting point was anti-absolute truth. And if you're anti-absolute truth, then the ultimate poser in this world is religion, right? I mean, they're the ones. They're the ones who are like, hey, we're going to tell you how everything is, how the universe began, how the universe will end, what it means, how you should behave, everything. And I was intrigued with it for years. In fact, my wife and some of my friends, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, they seemed to think that I was going to end up a devout Christian somehow, because I was so drawn, because I just found myself drawn to it. I just can't get enough of this stuff, and I don't know why exactly yet, and I don't see the comedy in it yet at that age, but I want to read it. I want to know. I'm interested in it. And then it was in my 40s, I would say. I'm a very elderly man. When in my 40s, I picked up the Bible again for probably the third time. I'd already read it a couple of times. And this time, for whatever reason, I thought, holy shit, this is hilarious. And why I haven't seen that before, holy shit, this is the ultimate found comedy. Because they make these ludicrous claims. I mean, these absurd claims based on nothing. And these ridiculous stories. And because I'm a comedy writer, and I would like to think a character comedy writer, this character at the center is a fucking madman. He's insane. He's cruel beyond belief. He's irrational. He's panicky. He's foolish. He's just, and we're supposed to accept him as pure good. He's all knowing, he's all good, all that stuff. And he's so clearly not. And so that struck me as really, really funny. And I thought, this is just like, it's just laying there. It's just laying there. And I'm just going to pick it up.
But it's funny that when these books came out, I was so involved in the atheist community, and yet it wasn't like Dawkins was talking about him. And
no, I wish he had. I tried to get him to.
In retrospect, that seems so odd. I mean, of course, the fact that Dawkins does not have a sense of humor and would not know a joke if it bit him in the ass, which I will also add, Dawkins is a friend of mine, but humor is not his strong suit.
No, I think he's great. I really like some of his books. I really like some of his books a lot, and I've read a lot of his stuff. And I managed to, because it's a pretty small community, right, of atheists, actually. It's like, like 50 or 100 people who are just kind of talking. And so I managed to get his email address, basically. And I'm like, would you play? And I met him, actually, at an event he did. And I, of course, I tried to be nice and stuck up to him a little bit, but it didn't work, and he didn't have any interest in reading it, and yeah, it's too bad. But
yeah, well,
Dana Gould liked it. That's a good thing. Dana knows some comedy.
Yeah, he does.
Dana Gould knows comedy better than Dawkins knows evolution. So you won on that front.
I mean, it was weird because just before Dawkins had said I thought I had an in, because he was like, what we need to do is laugh at these people. That was like his quote in 2015. And I'm like, cool, man. This is what I can do. This is what I can bring to this game, And then he was like, yeah, I don't want to read it. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, Dawkins asked me to write a blurb for his book, and his book had the word soul in the title. So I went to the introduction of James Brown at the Apollo, and I said there are two people that I allowed to use the word soul. One is James Brown, one is Richard Dawkins. And then I wrote, my blurb was, it's showtime here at the Apollo. Mr. Please, please, please. Mr. There is no God. Mr. Selfish Gene. I did the whole introduction, and I said, the hardest working man in evolutionary science, Richard Dawkins. And I sent it to Richard Dawkins, figuring I would get back, Penn, this is the greatest thing ever written. And I don't mean as a blurb, I mean the greatest thing ever written. It had me laughing hysterically. And the publisher wrote me back and said, Richard doesn't like that blurb.
Oh.
And I wrote to my friend Lawrence Krauss, who's closer to, is toured with Richard Dawkins, and said, this is the blurb I wrote. Why did Dawkins reject it? And Lawrence Krauss wrote back, the most horrifying sentence I've ever read. I don't think Richard Dawkins knows who James Brown is.
Yeah, he probably doesn't, I mean, he strikes me as a guy who's listened to a lot of Mozart and Bach. Not really. Well, I don't know that, but yeah, he's a beautiful writer. What makes him him is he's a big thinker. He is a big thinker, and he's a really good writer. And this guy can write. Like a lot of people in the atheist or scientific community, they're not particularly good writers. This guy can.
Well, Hitch.
You know what's cool is that he
Hitch.
was there at Oxford with the Pythons.
Yes.
Now that we're talking about it, he would have been the same era.
I wonder if they knew each other.
Well, we did a thing in our show where I wanted to do I've always wanted, I've been pitching this to Teller for 35 years. I wanted to do, there's nothing I like better than in gospel magic, the overextended metaphor. This die is our covenant with the Lord. This hourglass is Mary Magdalene's trust. Now I'm going to put those things that you can't understand at all, but the gospel churches do. So I had always wanted to write the Red Sovine soldier's deck of cards as an atheist thing, right? So we finally did it with Teller doing a card trick and me explaining the unified field theory and hadron collider and all that stuff as the atheist deck of cards with a deck of cards and overextended metaphors. And Eric Idle came to see our show with Steve Martin as his date. And afterwards, we're backstage, and Eric Idle says, that atheist deck of cards reminds me of a bit that Stephen Hawking did when he was doing stand-up at Oxford. Now, just the word stand-up in that sentence is wicked funny.
That's good.
But I did not know that Hawking hung out with the Pythons.
Wait. This is legit?
Oh, it's legit.
Stephen Hawking did stand-up comedy?
And it's not just that he could stand up that's amazing about that.
That's like finding out that like Albert Einstein was in a vaudeville show.
There's close to that. Albert Einstein wrote constantly to JoJo the Dog-Faced Boy in the Freak Show.
What?
They were pen pals.
Albert Einstein and JoJo the Dog-Faced Boy were pals? Wow, what was the nature of
there's a letter, which if I had more money, I would buy, that Einstein wrote to JoJo that said, I am really envious that you have time to just sit and think and don't have to spend time making your living. So Einstein was covetous of sitting on a platform with people pointing at you for having the face of a dog. Yeah, and Hawking's doing stand-up with the Pythons, and you think Bill and Ted is surreal. Have you looked at the real world?
strange world out there. Yeah.
So Dawkins would have been there at the same time, right?
Yeah, he would have.
Like the early mid 60s, right? Like 64.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that seems about right? Because I think Eric Idle, Dawkins, and Hawking are all the same age, aren't they? Kind of ish.
Yeah, they're all 70s.
Yeah.
You were on the set of Bill and Ted, so you got to work with. I mean, since we brought up Andy Kaufman, since we brought up Mel Brooks, we brought up the Pythons, we would be remiss to not bring up George Carlin. Did you? I became rather good friends with George Carlin. Did you get to hang out with him on the set of Bill and Ted?
I think I was too intimidated. You know, I mean, I walked onto the set, especially that scene I remember being in that dome thing that represented the future, and I was a big Bruce fan at the time. Like a really big Bruce fan at the time. And there's Clarence Clemens playing, you know, the most important guy in the world, and there's George Carlin like 10 feet away, you know, playing Rufus. And I think I was just so kind of nervous that I don't remember. I must have interacted with them a little. I was one of the two writers. I must have, but I don't. I was intimidated, and I found Carlin somewhat forbidding. Other people perceived him as being he's described as being kind of, you know, other people in the movie is like, well, he was so warm and cuddly and approachable, but I didn't. Okay, I'm an insecure person, and I'm not necessarily that good at, you know, talking to people who I don't know or haven't met, but so it's probably just me, but I found it kind of like, yeah.
Well, it was amazing. The first time, you know, I talked to George Carlin, it was just terrifying. I mean, he's the absolute top of that. I mean, you can throw in Richard Pryor, and you'd have no problem with that. But for that generation, there are no better.
Yeah, I would, you know, I would agree with that. I mean, I would put Pryor above myself. That's just my taste, but I think George.
Yeah, I think that. I think you could make that argument. You could probably win it. But I had memorized more of George Carlin's records, so personally, yeah. I think Richard has more pain in what he does, and consequently, it's deeper and sadder and stranger and more. And Pryor, I think probably when all is said and done, more original than George Carlin. Because, you know, George Carlin, there's a direct line drawn from Lenny Bruce that
Right.
There may not be as direct an antecedent to Richard Pryor.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, you can go to all the Chitlin circuits and you can go to Red Fox and all of that, but you don't get as direct as you do with Lenny Bruce.
Right. Yeah, and Pryor is just so naked and so vulnerable and so human.
And also, George Carlin didn't write on Blazing Saddles, so there you go.
There you go. Imagine, you know, Rich was supposed to play the sheriff. Imagine that. Fuck. I mean, Cleavon Little's great. You can't, I mean, he's great. But Rich playing Bart? Holy shit, it's a whole other level.
And the line that they gave that he was supposed to have with Madeline Kahn that didn't make the movie is a heartbreaker. Well,
which one?
She was supposed to be in the dark with Cleavon Little saying, "Is it real? Is it true? Is it true?"
Yeah.
And the line he was supposed to have was, "Lady, you're sucking on my arm."
Damn.
Yeah.
What were the censors in 1974?
Or I don't know, or Mel didn't like it, or we don't know. But that's been that did not make it to the final movie, sadly.
Unfortunate.
So you'd read I read the Bible too, and a few times, and I have this. I agree so much. I mean, when I was 25, all my friends said I was going to become evangelical. Yes, because my interest was so, I wasn't reading anything else except theological stuff. And I did not make I kind of stayed, I never moved into the comedy range. I mean, we did tricks that made fun of the Bible. But the brilliance of those three books. Now, you're doing Buddha next, or it hasn't come out. It's not out.
It's out. It's done.
I know it's not
it's out
because
world.
I haven't read it.
It's
It's out?
It just came out. Yeah, it just came out.
I will pick it up and start reading it tonight. And what's the gag on this?
The gag on this is I finished with God. I finished with this God character, and who I would have kept tracking if I could have. But, as the trail runs out, he keeps popping up. He pops up in the Quran, and then he pops up in the Book of Mormon. And it's like, same guy. And, just great comedy gold everywhere he goes because he's such a buffoon. But then the trail runs dry, and I thought, okay, well, what now? And maybe I'll take a look at these Eastern religions. And I have a little bit, because of all that Bodhi tree New Agey stuff, right? I have a little bit of a negative feeling about that stuff. And having met some Western Buddhists over the years and having thought that they were somewhat insufferable.
I don't know if you can modify insufferable with somewhat, but go on.
Okay. Insufferable human beings. Yeah, you're right. Somewhat insufferable. You're right about that. So I thought, well, I'm going to take a look at this. So I started reading their stuff. And you can't just read one book, right? Because it's not the Bible or the Quran or the Book of... It's hundreds of them. So I had to kind of immerse myself. And I took out my red pen and I just started marking it up. And I thought at a certain point, if I get enough red marks, then I got a book here. And I got enough red marks really, really quickly. And I thought, Buddhism, I think, gets a pass. Buddhism's perceived as the cool one. Buddhism's perceived as like the one you can be kind of hip, you can be kind of intellectual, you can be kind of scientific, you can be kind of philosophical. Maybe you can even be kind of an atheist.
I just finished a book called The Buddhist Atheist. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Yeah.
You just read a book called The Buddhist Atheist?
There's a bunch.
Yeah. Well, but right. Yeah, there's a bunch of those. That claim is made a lot.
And Christopher Hitchens was very aggressive that was bullshit.
It is bullshit. It's total bullshit. I mean, it's not atheism because he makes himself kind of a god. He's trumps the god. First of all the gods exist. All those Hindu gods exist. It's built on them, but they work for him. All the gods call him sir and defer to him. So I thought this guy's arrogance is...
For someone who wants to get rid of the ego.
Exactly. When it's ostensibly about getting rid of the ego. And what he has his followers call him is Tathagata. Tathagata means perfect one. And he's not, he makes it very clear, you're not calling me perfect one because I have an ego. I don't have an ego. You're calling me perfect one because I am perfect in every way. His idea, his looks are perfect. He's beautiful looking. His body is perfect. His physical prowess is perfect. His brain is perfect. He's perfect in every way. So the arrogance and the coldness, because the way he treats other people is unbelievably brutal and cruel, including his son. Because the creation story, their big heroic story, his moment of truth is he's raised a very rich, privileged boy who doesn't know anything. That he doesn't even know there's sickness or old age because he's sheltered. He's so sheltered until he's 30 years old. He doesn't know that stuff, and then he figures it out that there's sickness, old age, and death, and it just blows his mind. He's just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so, at the age of 30, he walks out on his wife and his newborn son. Before he goes, he names his son Rahula means shackle. So he's telling his son, here's a parting blow. I'm going to name you Shackle, but you're not going to shackle. I will not be shackled. And this is presented as a very heroic story. And so he goes out into the world to save the world. And the so-called beautiful ideas are not beautiful at all. Not in the least. So I thought, this thing's got it coming. This thing's got it coming.
They're asking for it, yeah.
Just have this burning through my head. There was the joke going around when Salman Rushdie did the Satanic Verses that said his next book was going to be called Buddha the Fat Fuck. And when I was out to lunch with Salman Rushdie, I did my favorite thing, which you don't get to do much, which is to ask somebody what their favorite jokes were about them. So I got to say to Salman Rushdie, what jokes did you like in the late 80s? and he said, who is blonde with big tits and lives in New Zealand? Salman Rushdie. And the other joke he told me was, what's Salman Rushdie's new book called? Buddha the Fat Fuck. And I love the fact that you have written Buddha the Fat Fuck.
Yeah, he's a complete asshole from beginning to end on every page. All these stories, and again, I'm doing the same thing I did with the God book. I'm just sort of hoisting them on their own petard, right? These are your books. I'm referencing their books again and again and again. I'm not making stuff up. You present your guy this way, and you think these stories make him sound amazing and wonderful, but they make him sound like the most awful guy in the history of the world. He's horrible. He's so arrogant. He's so mean. He's so cold. He's such a fraud. It's so fraudulent. This one's really and what I really bumped into is, like, it's so fraudulent because what you were saying is ostensibly no ego, but it's all ego. It's all ego. It's all about this guy's ego. And they're fake loving kindness. Go to a Buddhist website, an American Buddhist website. So, loving kindness. We're just so filled with compassion. But it's bullshit because their belief system is like, don't love anybody. Pull away. Don't like it's bad. You don't want to love your children.
You know, not loving your wife and children is something that's built into all these religions. It's built into Christianity. It's everywhere. Yeah.
Right, because you're supposed to love, you're supposed to be transcend that somehow, and love all of mankind. But this is absurd, and it turns them into fucking fakes. And that's what I think I was picking up on. It's not true. I don't buy it. You don't love everyone. You don't feel love and kind. I love my wife. Right? I love her. I love my children. I love them. I love them deeply. I love them truly. I don't love mankind. Why would I? It doesn't even make sense.
So you're saying if God said you could kill your kid, you should kill your kid? Fuck him.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, fuck that guy.
I want to emphasize to people who haven't read your books how incredibly wonderful the footnoting system is. You know, last week we had on Nicholson Baker, who wrote The Mezzanine, which is one of the greatest footnoted books ever. And last night, out by my pool, rereading your book, you have this, one of the greatest footnote jokes ever, where God is talking about how they say I repeat myself, and I've said this many times, and then it's followed by, what is it, a dozen parentheticals from places in different books of the Bible where God has said the same thing. And it plays that joke. The joke is right there and so nice and meta. And it was set up and I didn't smell it coming. And all the joke is in the parentheticals. But the fact that it's so well footnoted that you can go, you know, are they really talking about donkey dongs? Are they really talking? Yeah, they are. You can go and look at it.
Yeah. They are. I mean, I'm not really I'm sort of extrapolating here and there, and I'm connecting dots, and I'm doing my writer's work, you know, to a degree, but it's all based on their stories. You guys, this is what you say, the premise is, if everything you say is true, what does that look like? Who are these characters? What does this character have to be?
I know that after today, when my wife harangues me for not spending enough time with my children, I'll inform her how perfect I am.
There you go. There you go. That's right.
It's
a good move. You can't argue when somebody says I'm perfect.
You know, Hitchens used to say that if the God as presented in the Bible was true, our only choice would be to go up against him.
Of course. Right, absolutely. I mean, if that guy is true, then the only reasonable thing to do is fight him. Because he's a supervillain who somehow has taken on the name God, the good. But he's not. And clearly, at least if you just take the Bible as the truth, he's just a vile, horrendous character, and Satan does almost nothing wrong.
Yeah, no.
Satan is the hero. He comes out as the hero if you read it literally.
He does, because all he basically does is kind of ask him a few questions here and there. Are you sure? Which is the believer. That's what makes you a villain in the eyes of the believer.
Well, there's a movie called Hail Satan. Hail Satan with a question mark. That's done by a filmmaker that's been on our show called Penny Lane. Not the Beatles song, not the groupie, but the filmmaker Penny Lane. And
not the fake name, not a made-up name, her real given name.
And what's amazing about that movie is that the Satanists really do make the point that following Satan is the pro-scientific position. And it's a really well-made argument, not a wink and we're just doing this to be provocative, but really, if you look at this, the character we want to identify with philosophically is the character of Satan.
I think that's absolutely right. I think right from the beginning, when you get to the tree of good, and right at the beginning, somehow this all-powerful, all-knowing God, he chooses to allow his arch enemy to, undo him at the very beginning of the story, apparently. Or he's not all-powerful and Satan sneaks in. But all Satan's really saying, and some people say, oh, the serpent's not Satan, but that's laughable because who the fuck else is it? Of course it's Satan. We have such a limited cast of characters. You're introducing a whole other villain who never shows up anywhere in the story. Of course it's Satan, given what we know. Obviously it is. And all he's saying is, he's not telling you the truth. And he's not telling you the truth. He's not telling you the truth. It's not going to kill him. Nothing's going to happen. That's all he's saying. Right at the and she, because she's got a little bit of spunk, unlike Adam, who's spineless, she actually listens, and she's like, right. So she becomes instantly. Women become the villain of the whole story, right from the get-go. But yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Satan is the voice of rationalism. He's the voice of doubt. He's the voice of skepticism. These are all beautiful things about being a human being, right? Like skepticism, doubt, uncertainty. These are gifts. They're not bad things for us to shut down this whole view of like, no, shut it. That's bad. Any doubt. I mean, that's craziness. That's craziness. And that's why those people always look so fucked. They always look ultimately so repressed, so squashed, so miserable, so pinched, so fake, talking in their kind of constrained voices and their constrained body language. And, it's a disaster.
They're almost insufferable.
Do you get any flack for these books?
I'm not on social media at all.
That's very wise.
That's what people say. I just don't think I could do it. I'm just like, I think it would be bad for me knowing myself, but, I don't need to have people going, fuck you, you're going to burn for, I mean, I know they
Even amongst, you must have friends who are religious, yeah?
Not anymore.
Problem solved.
Right. I mean, maybe back in the day. Now? Come on. I mean, that's a bridge too far. Well, I mean, I'm not going to take your stupid stories seriously, I mean, I'm just not.
He killed both God and the devil in a movie.
That's right. That's right. And by the way, just circling back to the improv thing, I'm going to say something that writers shouldn't say. That thing was pretty funny on the page. That Rapturepalooza thing was pretty damn funny on the page, and it's not funny on the screen. And that's because they improv the shit out of it and didn't have Adam McKay running.
Did you have trouble selling that?
Rapturepalooza?
Yeah.
No. I mean,
because Life of Brian, they pretty much doing that out of pocket.
Yeah, well, Life of Brian's 79 and Rapturepalooza is 2000, and so that 30 years probably does make a difference, and maybe what Hitchens and Dawkins and what they were doing. Hitchens in particular, I think, was really an important voice. I think he was a hugely important voice, and it's a big loss that he's not here anymore. Because he was so scathing and he was so funny and he was so witty and he was just so brilliant at denouncing all this bullshit. So I think by the time we get to 2010, it was also a low budget movie. You know, they wouldn't have spent 20 million on it. They spent like 2-3 million on it. It was really, really low budget. So they just viewed it as like, well, you know, we'll take a shot at it and maybe it'll score.
What are you working on now? You have no religious figures left, do you?
I don't. Yeah. What am I going to do now? You know, I've sort of thought about circling back to the new agey stuff, but it's a little fish in a barrel. You know, it's so on the surface, dumb, that stuff. But it's funny. It is funny, and I know it really, really well because I grew up so much inside it. Beyond that, I looked at Hinduism for a minute, and I was like, yeah, you know, I just don't find it as ridiculous because I don't know about you. I don't find polytheism as insulting or offensive as monotheism. I don't think it's any truer, but I don't think it's as ugly and mean. You know, it's just like, no, one. Just, there's one. And that's it. You know, polytheism seems a little more like, well, there's a bunch.
But I guess you could take down the Jains, right?
Yeah, I could take down the chain. Yes.
Because those fuckers with their masks over their faces and not eating root vegetables, fuck them.
Yeah, fuck them, man. Yeah, god damn it. Fucking Jains. They're ruining the world. Yeah, no, I don't know.
When you fly Virgin Atlantic to England, or when there was a world you could go into, one of the meals that you could choose was a Jain meal.
Did you ever have one?
I did once, yes. You know, they take out, they're not allowed to eat anything that was alive when it was picked. So it becomes very tricky, and the processing and stuff. So you're left with, I think, certain leaves are allowed, but you can't eat any tubers because they're alive when potatoes are killed for you to eat them, and stuff like that.
So if an apple falls from
Yes.
a tree, you could, but you couldn't pick it.
Yeah.
So when it's overripe, basically.
Yeah.
And you have to sweep ahead when you're walking because you don't want to step on an insect or anything. I mean, I always appreciated them because at least they put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, you know, I bumped into them. I bumped into them when I was doing Buddha.
Yeah.
Because I think they emerge at kind of the same time.
They're also nude a lot.
Which I approve of.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
You know, there's a lot, the multiple wives being nude, the no alcohol, all that part of religion, I'm really okay with. Well, I also, I live in Vegas, so there's an awful lot of Mormons around, and when they find out that I don't drink coffee and I've never had a sip of alcohol, they always say to me, well, you're pretty much a Mormon. And I go, except for the no God thing, which you guys have said is important.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder.
Is that even really all that important to you guys?
Well, I've had many religious people tell me that the believing in God part of religion is not important. And it's something I cannot get my head around. And that's why I love talking with you so much, because whatever mental illness I have, you seem to have it too. When people say to me, you don't understand about being a Christian, the Bible is not important. God is not important. It's a lifestyle club we want to be part of, and it's fellowship. And you don't understand the way we understand the Bible. And my answer is always, no, I fucking don't.
Well, and as long as they basically are going to stick to the story that is, if you don't agree with them, you're going to fucking roast forever.
No, we don't really believe that. Those are just metaphorical. And I go, metaphor for what? When you back modern religious people that are kind of sort of in our circle, when you back them into a corner, they will not go, Matt, you know people, right?
Yeah.
When you back them into a corner and say, am I going to rot in hell forever? What do they answer? No, they say no, right?
Yeah, they you hear terms like cafeteria Catholic, I pick and choose what I want to believe, or
You're a good guy.
Yeah, it's just a good way to it's just a good way to think about good and evil and that kind of stuff. And the biggest mistake atheists make is believing that everyone who's religious is a zealot of their religion, and they're not. No one.
You know, that's what they attack Dawkins. They always say Dawkins is attacking a Christian God that no one really believes in. And that seems so disrespectful to people who say they believe in God.
Well, yeah, because it turns it's like, well, it's not even really much of a belief system. Then. You know, it's just sort of like, well, it's a lifestyle that works, and we try to stay healthy, and we try to, and we like the community. We have each other's backs, and there's some good moral lessons here, that teach about right and wrong, and you don't have to believe any of that bad stuff. But
the other thing is, there aren't any good moral lessons in the Bible.
Ecclesiastes might have a few kind of okay ones. Ecclesiastes is different, but I agree with you. Yeah, not really.
It's either obvious or wrong.
I mean, if all it amounts to, if you're gonna, it does raise the question. It's like, well, why is this gigantic story about the creation of the universe and the meaning of everything and morality, why is that necessary?
If all you really want is time with friends and a covered dish supper.
Yeah, I mean, why would you need such an enormous story? And if you don't even believe it's true, if you don't even actually think that's true,
then I don't even know what you're doing. I mean, I don't have any respect for any of those people.
Like, what's the point? Like, I mean, at least if you really fucking believe it, I believe this is true. Okay, well, I think that's kind of craziness, but it's. I think I've always had it almost sounds like verging on agnosticism, and I've always had a problem with agnosticism. It's like, you don't know what. I mean, what do you like?
It's like being undecided on the election 3 days out. Like, you don't know? You don't know at this point?
In an election, they say, this will all be swung by the undecided voters. And you go, so the stupidest people in the United States of America
are going to swing it. Yeah, right. I mean, how do you not know? I don't. So I think that particular idea of, the cafeteria Christian.
But obviously we're wrong. Obviously they don't believe it. Because if you really believe you were going to go to hell forever, there would be no premarital sex. No one would break any of these rules.
Right.
It's like when you look at the cover of National Enquirer, when you're in the checkout line or midnight, and it says UFOs have landed in the desert. You know that not one person walking by believes that because they're still buying groceries. If I believe that UFOs had landed at Nellis Air Force Base, I don't finish this conversation with you. I don't even say goodbye.
Yeah.
Run. Yes, run. And I'm telling you, if I believe that, sex outside of marriage, before marriage, would send me to hell for all eternity, the entire cast of kink.com could not get it out of my pants.
You're right. I think they don't actually believe it.
So once I was on a TV show, and they said to me, you refer to yourself as a hardcore atheist. What makes you hardcore? And I said, I think I don't believe that other people believe.
It was super, wasn't it? Super atheist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't believe that other people believe. Because I don't understand how you can believe a page of the Bible and still function in the world.
I mean, there are people that believe as passionately as what you're describing of, but those people are not in charge, And I think Penny Lane's documentary, Hail Satan, really pointed out that the movers and shakers at the top of all these religions are simply power brokers like any other political organization.
Well, we have a huge piece of information, which is that the evangelicals in the United States of America are overwhelmingly supporting Trump.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can have that go. I mean, maybe they're the ones that really believe, because that is the kind of crazy. But the way the evangelicals try to pass it off as this is good moral teaching and stuff becomes nonsense.
Oh yeah, they're more hardcore than the average Christian. That's just not true. They're just more organized as a political machine than any other religion.
I mean, I figure ultimately, and this is what I saw. My starting point, I guess, was my dad when it came to religion, and my dad was so scared. Oh my God, my dad was so scared. He was so scared of death. He was, and probably a lot of good horror writers are scared. That's why they're good at it, you know. And he wrote science fiction, fantasy, but you know, he wrote a good amount of horror. And he was really, really scared. And so I think that whatever he had to believe to be less scared, and he was scared of death. Oh my God, he was scared of death. He was so scared of death. And whatever it took to comfort himself, whatever it took to make him feel better.
And how did your father die?
Well, he essentially died of old age. He was 87. He died just sort of, you know, organ failure, I guess. So
He lived a pretty good life, though.
You didn't make that 238, though. 257.
he didn't make 257.
How did he come up with 257?
Maybe it was dog years.
He had 2 bottles of Heinz 57 and was like, wait a minute. This is a sign.
Yeah, I don't know. He used to read this magazine back in the 70s, a very Bodhi Tree magazine called Fate. I don't know if Fate magazine is still published, but Fate magazine was just all these stories of, you know, afterlife experiences and heaven experiences and transporting your body. What is that called? You know, where you astral projection experiences and all kinds of. And so I'm sure there was some ad in Fate. Lived to be 257. Right.
Was he a Pac-Man fan? Because 256 is the last level before it breaks.
No. I don't think so. The idea of my dad playing Pac-Man.
Now, I asked you this and you gave me a joking answer because you thought I was asking just for religious stuff. But what are you working on now?
I'm working on a new book, which is that's a very, very hard book to even categorize or talk about. I mean, I really did. I really got a kick out of Presto, and I really enjoyed it because it's such a odd book in a way. It's so many different things at one time. I mean, it's on the surface, it's kind of, I guess, a diet book or a weight loss book or something like that.
There's so many crazy digressions.
I don't stay on the subject. When did you lose all the weight?
Oh, I lost it at about like in my late teens. I was very, very overweight from the time I was 7 until I was about 17. I was really, really a fat kid, and it really, it really plagued me. You know, it's a horrible. I don't know if I get the impression from your book that you were not overweight when you were a kid. That you were a skinny kid, you know, kind of. And when you're fat at 12, 13, 14, 15, when all that stuff's happening, all that girl stuff's happening, all that, you know, figuring out who you are, how you fit in this world, what to do with yourself, man, it's really, really super duper painful. And it wasn't. So at 17, I guess I did, you know, my own little variation of your cray ray, you know. It's just like, don't eat, you know. Just don't eat. And because I'd been really, obviously I just had eaten way too much. And I just sort of stopped. I didn't stop completely, but I really stopped eating. And so I would go to bed every night starving. And that was great because going to bed starving meant that I was going to get up the next day and weigh less.
You know, it's really in Dr. Greger's book on how not to diet, he has some incredible statistics. You know, if you talk to a blind person and ask them hypothetically if they would trade being blind for being deaf or for being paraplegic, people right across the board choose to stay with their own problem. So blind people don't want to be deaf. They want to stay blind, and so on. The only exception to that is fat people. who will choose anything other than being fat. And there's some really incredibly depressing statistics on how much deep pain people who are very, very fat go through.
I just remember feeling tremendous self-hatred because being a 16-year-old and looking at myself in the mirror and, being surrounded by a bunch of 16-year-old boys who were kind of lean and fit and super athletic and just like that. And all the stuff with girls is happening. People are starting to pair off. And it just, man, it was just the self-loathing was really, really powerful. And the knowledge that I'd kind of done it to myself. I mean, not 100% because, it's the family you grew up in, it's whatever. But basically, I put the food in my mouth, I ate. I wasn't 3, I was, 15, 16. So, yeah, it really, I mean, I've been thin now or thin-ish for, I'm going to be 62. So for 45 years, and that fat kid inside me lives on. I mean, I don't know. Do you?
No, I was never skinny, but starting at about 30, I started getting fat and just kept doing it, until it got to be, for me, it was never vanity. For me, it was just, I was unhealthy.
Yeah.
Well, you said in the book that your kids were a big part of that.
Yeah, big part of that. You just, you don't want to. How old are your children?
His kids are 29 and 26.
Jiminy Cricket. And are they writers at all?
No, my son is a fine artist. Hey, that's one of his paintings. Yeah, and
his daughter's a grade school teacher.
So the sickness stopped with you for the showbiz sickness.
My daughter is, I'm telling, I don't know, like, I've known a lot of funny people in my life. Oops, sorry about that. Speaking of my children, that's not just a message. I'm supposed to be turned off. My daughter is one of them. Well, both of my kids are just like insanely funny people. But yeah, the movie, Hollywood, entertainment business thing, yeah.
It's just not something that they want.
So you're writing a book and not another movie?
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty much done with movies. It's a hard gig, It's a hard gig because, I mean, it's a pretty good gig. It can be lucrative or not. I mean, I had stretches where I didn't make anything for a while because nobody I remember an agent saying, like, well, you're making, nobody's buying. So it's like, okay, well, what can you do? It can be a pretty good gig. You have a lot of free time. You get to, just be making stuff up. But mostly it doesn't work. Mostly what I wrote didn't work. And even some of the stuff I got made, a lot of it didn't work. If you're a writer, I don't know, it feels kind of good to just write something and it is what it is. Like these God books, it's just sort of like, it is. It just is. And I'm really proud and happy of the Bill and Ted movies, but it's like, shit. I mean, it couldn't be more collaborative. I mean, it's so many different people that it takes to do that. And a book feels good and also just suits me. I like to just sit by myself and just write. I mean, that feels really good to me. Anyway, so the book's kind of about comedy. It's kind of about comedy and what comedy's meant to me and why it's been so important to me and what I think is funny and why I think it's funny and shit that has historically been seen as funny that I don't think is funny at all and why I don't think it's funny. And so it's like that.
And all I've got in my head now is Buddha the Fat Fuck. What is the real name of your book?
The Buddha Story.
Well, I'm going to read that tonight. I will get it on Kindle and I will slam it down because it makes me laugh a lot. And also because I've been doing, Sam Harris has gotten me doing meditation and stuff. I think maybe I need someone to slap me around and you might be the guy. You might just be the guy that will slap me out of this. I will. Thank you so much, Chris. It's been just a joy to talk to you.
Awesome,
I have one suggestion for your life, if I may. I realize this is presumptuous.
Yes.
I think you should say, Brother Theodore put me to bed when I was 6, and Rod Serling gave me my first cigarette. I think that should be the way it is. And that was Penn Sunday School.
That was Penn Sunday School.
Cha-cha-cha.
And to our listening ears,
You become naked.
nature sang and round us rang the music of the spheres. That was Penn Sunday School.
And next week we'll be talking about Fool Us, which we were way backed up, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
That was Penn Sunday School.
But it was worth it. These were 2 good weeks. I enjoyed them very much.
That was Penn Sunday School.
And unlike Buddha, we love you.